What up, Wizards? It's Dev, and we are at day 6 now of Aetherdrift Previews, and things have really started to heat back up in this slab. We got way more cards today than we had the last few days, it being the weekend and all. 30 of them to look at. And there's a lot of uncommons today. A few of them, but a lot of them actually really worth taking a look at. So let's go ahead and dive into it. But we start with the commons, of course. There are 6 of them today, and 2 of them I actually think look really good, but we got to start with Daring Mechanic and Gustal Blockbuster. Now, Daring Mechanic is 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 3/3 Human Artificer. You can pay 4 mana, that's 3 and a white, to put a +1/+1 counter on target mount or vehicle. Note that this is not an exhaust ability. You can just use this over and over as many times as you have mana for in limited, so it's a decent sink that comes at an okay rate. 3 mana for a 3/3. No keywords is kind of lame, but still, it's alright in limited, but really not much to write about when it comes to this card, so I'll move on to Gustal Blockbuster. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 3/2 Human Berserker. When this creature enters, you may sacrifice a creature or vehicle. When you do, destroy target artifact an opponent controls. Well, I feel like this could have just been destroy an artifact an opponent controls. I feel like that would have been just a lot better, right? But you got to come down on board presence to get rid of their thing. And it shouldn't be too hard to make this guy work some of the time, but I'm just not sure you really want to. I will say in limited, though, at common, this could be okay. You might have a number of tokens around that you don't mind sacrificing, a useless vehicle or two that you don't mind coming down off of, as long as you can get rid of your opponent's best card on their side of the track. So, I don't mind this in limited. I think it's mostly going to be a removal spell some of the time, but don't discount the fact that you have to come down on presence. We also got Loxodon Surveyor and Scrap Compactor today. Loxodon Surveyor is 3 mana. It's 2 and a green for a 3/3 Elephant Scalp with Start Your Engines. And once you're at max speed, you can pay 3 and exile this thing from your graveyard to draw a card. We saw, a Goblin the other day that's a lot like this, but I think he's a little bit cheaper to cast. That said, this is the same rate as the white card we were just looking at. A 3 mana 3/3 is not embarrassing in limited, so sometimes you'll play it. It'll contribute to, at least starting your speed count if your speed count isn't already started, so I guess that's fine. And I like abilities like this because it doesn't even have to be on the battlefield. It's just kind of a late game card advantage thing, and that's not too bad, but again, nowhere outside of limited. Just like Scrap Compactor, this is a single mana for an artifact. You can pay 3 and tap it and sack it to have it deal 3 damage to a creature, or you can pay 6, tap it and sack it to destroy target creature or vehicle. So, just as is the theme today, neat little limited card here. This can blow up pretty much any threat in the format in limited, so that's kind of neat. But for a lower amount of mana, you can just bolt something, and sometimes you'll want to do that too. We already have a couple of things in standard that are kind of like this in the artifact slot, and usually they're just limited minded. Any deck can play them removal spells for like mono green or whatever, but outside of that function, I don't really think they make it anywhere in standard. But cool little card. But at the end of the day, it probably is just scrap. So we'll move on to my favorite 2 commons of the day, Collision Course and Ether Jacket here. Now, Collision Course is 2 mana. It's 1 and a white for a sorcery. Choose 1 either. Collision Course deals X damage to target creature, X being the number of permanents you control that are creatures and or vehicles. Or you can just destroy target artifact. So maybe potentially, but likely not. But I still want to point it out. A sideboard piece for, say, the Boros or Jeskai, tokens deck or Convoke deck, right, with Imidane's Recruiter. This is a nice piece if you need to blow up Urobrass Forge, or there's like an important vehicle you need to blow up that comes from this set or something like that. It's a nice thing to be able to destroy artifacts. I kind of like that, but got a bunch of tokens on the board in that deck, so. And, rabbits. I guess if rabbits becomes a deck, that one goes really wide, too. So, in anything that needs to blow up artifacts out of the sideboard, I guess this is an interesting piece. I think sorcery speed does hurt it a good bit, but it's still going to be something that you want to remember you have access to. Apart from that, though, the last common of the day was Aether Jacket. 3 mana for a 2/1 Thopter. It's an artifact creature. It has flying and vigilance, and you can pay 2, tap it, and sack it to destroy another target artifact at sorcery speed. So, I'll say this, the fact that it is summoning sick and you have to wait a turn to actually use its ability, lame, and the fact that it's sorcery speed, pretty lame. But altogether, I think this is a neat card for limited and one of the better ones that we've seen at least today, right? But in some cases, I think this might be, a fantastic card to play in nearly any limited deck, making it one of the stronger commons that I've seen at least. But that said, I've already sort of highlighted its shortcomings. There's definitely some issues with the card, but it is a Windrake in Limited. You know, it's a 3-mana, 2-power flyer that any deck can play, and you can cash it in to destroy like their best vehicle or their bomb vehicle, you know. So I actually think this is fantastic, and I'm surprised it's not an uncommon. But let's go ahead and move on to the uncommons. There are some really good ones today, but we got to zoom through the stuff that I'm not as impressed by. We don't want to take too long on these. I don't want to get the tires stuck in the mud. So let's look at Pride of the Road in Risen Necro Regent here. Every time I see Pride of the Road, I get the song stuck in my head. Pride of the Road. I know it's supposed to be King of the Road, but I just can't help it. I'm lame. This is 4 mana, 3 and a white for a 2/5 zombie cat warrior, hey, with vigilance and start your engines. It also has max speed. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature or vehicle you control gains double strike until end of turn. Okay, so I like double strike, and I kind of like the 5 toughness, too. Nothing wrong with the vigilance, I guess, but ultimately I think the package is a little bit expensive, but nice kind of late game explosiveness, especially if you can get a trample creature and play. Double strike and trample go together like peanut butter and ladies, you know. But Risen Necro Region over here is 5 mana. It's 4 and a black for a 5/4 zombie cat knight. Loving all the cats in the set. This also has start your engines, and once you're at max speed, you get a 2/2 zombie token during your end step. This is fine. I guess, you know, I don't think you're going to break the world apart in Limited with board presence, but in Sealed, this might help you close a game. We also got Haunted Hellride and Trade the Helm today. Haunted Hellride is 3 mana, 1 blue-black for a 3/3 vehicle with crew 1. Nice. Whenever you attack, target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains Death Touch until end of turn. You also get to untap it. That's kind of neat, actually. I think this isn't like standard playable or anything, but it is a whenever you attack thing, so you don't even have to crew this thing. Don't have to attack with it to get this bonus. I think it's kind of neat. Death Touch is great, right? And obviously any power bonus on attack is going to be something you're looking for. Also, you get to untap the thing, so I think that's kind of neat. You know, kind of gives it pseudo-vigilance, and you can even untap your own Hellride if that's the thing that you targeted, and it can get back on defense. So, I don't know. That's not too bad. Really, really low crew cost. I don't hate this card whatsoever, but again, I shouldn't have to tell you no real standard play. Just a neat little thing for attacking into mirror decks in Limited. Trade the Helm is tempting, but probably not great. This is 5 mana, 4 and a blue for a sorcery. This cycles for 2. It's the best part of the card, but you can also exchange control of target artifact or creature you control, and target artifact or creature an opponent controls. The old switcheroo steal effect in blue. The old switch-a-blue. You see this from time to time, and it's never like a great effect, especially at this mana cost. 5 mana is kind of a lot for this, but unlike, say, an aura that steals your opponent's creature, this just takes your opponent's creature forever, and they can't, like, destroy the aura and get their guy back or whatever. Like, destroy the creature that stole it and get their guy back. It's never happening. So this tends to be better in general than most control magic effects that come on auras or other creatures. I tend to like that, but still, you have to have a creature to exchange or an artifact to exchange. They have to have an artifact to exchange, which is sometimes a tall order outside of Limited. So I'm not, like, too sure about this card, although I've liked versions of it in the past, and this one at least has cycling. So the problem with a lot of these, they rot in your hand until the exact right situation comes up or you get the mana, right? But in this case, you know, cycling I think actually makes the card way better than most of its variants, so I will give it that, but I couldn't rate it like too high at the end of the day. So let's keep it pushing. We got to look at Spire, Mech Cycle, and Spike Shell Harrier here. Now, Mech Cycle, again, pretty interesting for Limited, man. This is 5 mana, 4 and a red for a 5/4 vehicle with haste, and it crews for 2. Exhaust. Tap another untapped mount or vehicle you control. This vehicle becomes an artifact creature forever. Put a +1/+1 counter on it for each mount and or vehicle you control other than this vehicle. So that's actually pretty sick. You know, if you've got like 3 other mounts or vehicles in play, then suddenly, yeah, 8 power haste guy with crew 2. If he trampled, I think that would be way, way better, but this thing can still just come out of nowhere for, you know, as much as 9 damage, depending on how the board is set up or how plotting the game of Sealed has been and at your pre-release, you know, so I think it's kind of neat. Like, if your vehicle's deck contains red, you know, then suddenly this thing gets kind of insane, depending on sort of the positioning again. So I don't hate it. Spike Shell Harrier is neat in that it's one of the only things we've seen that can really manipulate speed. Kind kind of turn back the odometer for your opponent, which I think is neat. 5 mana, a lot of 5 mana uncommons today. This is 4 and a blue for a 4/4 artifact robot turtle. Okay. Whenever this creature enters, return target creature or vehicle an opponent controls to its owner's hand. If that opponent's speed is greater than each other player's speed, reduce that opponent's speed by 1. This effect can't reduce their speed below 1. It just occurred to me that this is a blue shell. I don't know why it took me so long. This is only like the third time I've looked at the card today. But yeah, it's a leader seeker. Exactly what this is. It blows up the creature in the lead, whatever you determine that is. You know what I mean? And then it reduces speed. I mean, look at the art. This is literally a blue shell. A legally distinct blue shell. 5 mana is a bit much, but as far as mana war effects go, it's not too bad. Again, in limited, where I think the manipulating speed is going to be more of a thing. The cool thing is too, if your opponent is on full speed, max speed by turn 5, which they very well could be, then this will take them off max speed, which could completely neuter like half their team, depending on what they got going on over there. So I think it's actually really neat in limited, but obviously, I mean, not really a standard playable card. So let's keep moving. We're going to step it up a little bit in terms of quality, but not all the way just yet, and look at Gastal Raider and Dune Drifter here. Now, Gastal Raider is 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 2/1 Vampire Rogue. I want you to note how many vampires are in this set. We're going to look at another good one once we get into the rares. But for now, this one is 3 mana for a 2/1, Start Your Engines. With max speed, this guy gets +1/+1 and has menace. Okay. When this creature enters, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose an instant or sorcery card from it. That player discards that card. Now, we do already have like a rat in standard, I think it is. Maybe it's a lizard. It's a lizard in standard that does this at the same mana cost. And if you've dealt damage to them or they lost life that turn, you get to just take any card from their hand. However, if they haven't lost life, they just get to pitch whatever card they want to. So there's going to be situations where this card is better, but it's mostly going to be for taking the Sunfall out of their hand or Day of Judgment or whatever sweeper that you're looking to, get rid of because you're an aggressive deck. But, any kind of removal, or if their deck relies upon Raise the Past or some other really important instant or sorcery, then obviously this deals with those too. So pretty interesting little card here, but I'm just not convinced that it's quite standard playable, but we'll see as far as like vampires or speed deck goes, if this thing can fit in somewhere. But again, that's kind of a tall order, I think, for a card like this, despite how good it might look. But there's definitely spots for it, so we'll see. Apart from that, Dune Drifter over here is a pretty weak reanimation spell, but not a whole lot of reanimator spells leave a creature on the board, so let's take a look at it. This is white-black X for a 3/3 vehicle that crews for 2. When it enters, return target artifact or creature card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So I kind of like the idea of just bringing back a 1-drop that can crew this, and it costs you 3 mana. You get 3/3 and you get a decent 1-drop back. It's could be okay, but starting at a total mana value of 4, 5, 6, especially, that's when this thing starts getting good. But the problem is you don't really want to spend like 6 or God forbid like 7 mana for your reanimator spell. And obviously, most of the stuff we're reanimating in standard costs like 7 mana. Atraxa, Valgaboth costs 9, so you'll never reanimate like the truly big bad, ladies with this thing. So I'm pretty sure it's right out. I guess you can get an Abhorrent Oculus with it for 5 mana, but like, who's doing that when Helping Hand is 1 mana, right? So I'm just not sure, again, that this is destined for much standard play, but it is interesting, like, value in limited that I think an Orzhov deck is going to dig. Now let's look at 2 of my favorite uncommons of the day, but these are not necessarily where we start the best uncommons of the day, although I do think these kind of gatekeep the best commons of the day. After these, we'll get into the really good stuff, but I really like Thundering Broodwagon as well as Racer's Scoreboard, mostly for the reference. I'm not sure how good the card actually is, but Broodwagon, speaking of reanimator spells or pieces, a pretty interesting thing. 6 mana, 2/2 black, 2 green for a 6/5 vehicle that crews for 3 and has menace and reach. It also cycles for 2, but when it enters, destroy target non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value 4 or less. So I don't love the last line of text, but this does hit like most important things in standard. Non-land permanent too, that's kind of sick. Reminds me a little bit of like a Binding the Old Gods, right? Just a little bit. But interesting reanimator target, or here, because you'd have to have something like Invasion of Tolvada, even though I'm not actually sure that says non-land permanent now that I think about it. But we just saw a 4 mana like Zombify for artifacts, so that could bring this into play. And I believe that if it's a vehicle that you get back with that card, it actually just turns it into an artifact creature forever while it's at it. But there's all kinds of other stuff in Standard that can get this back, and the Enter the Battlefield trigger is actually really, really good. Interestingly, you don't have to use like Bitter Triumph or Liliana of the Veil or anything like that to dump this into your graveyard. You don't have to have some sort of discard enabler. Just cycle it. Just cycle it on turn 2 or whatever, EOT, and put it into your yard. And then, like, within the next couple of turns, you can get it back pretty easily. So, and once you do, let's not discredit the fact this is a huge guy. Like, 6'5" menace reach is actually a pretty tall man, and crew 3 is not like too much to ask, right? And again, there's even a couple of, or at least one reanimator spell I can think of that's just going to turn it into a creature for you anyway, so you don't have to worry about crew. Just all together, man, decent package here. I like it. I don't think that any of the Golgari decks as currently built are going to run this thing, but that is a really good Enter the Battlefield trigger. Anyway, we'll move on to Racer's scorecard here. This is 4 mana for an artifact with Start Your Engines. At max speed, spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. By the way, when this enters, you draw 2 cards, and then you discard a card. So this is a Stone Calendar. This is a riff on Stone Calendar, and I see Stone Calendar, I hit thumbs up, you know what I mean? It's just, I like the card. I'm not sure it really does anything. This isn't the absolute best, mana generation piece in the world, although if you cast more than 1 spell in a turn, obviously it's ramping you by 2 or 3 depending on how many spells you cast and what they cost. So this could potentially be decent. Stone Calendar has always been decent if you can get it into play. It costs too much to play in the first place, kind of the joke with Stone Calendar, but this costs less. That said, you're still kind of sacrificing your turn 4 to not do nothing, but not do a whole heck of a lot, to be honest. So again, I don't have the highest hopes for scoreboard, but I get your reference. But here we are at the decent uncommons. Let's take a look. Here's Veteran Beast Rider and Dredger's Insight to kick things off. Now, Beast Rider over here is probably mostly a limited signpost. I'm going to let you know right now, but it's one of the best ones in the entire set. And I could see this making the jump to, if not standard, Commander. Let's take a look. 3 mana, 1 a green and a white for a 3/4 human knight. Bars. At the beginning of your end step, untap each creature you control. Okay, and you can also pay 4 mana, 2 green, white, to have creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. So, nice little mana sink ability again there, mostly for limited, but pumping the team is valuable as a mana sink on in a lot of different board situations. Obviously, it's instant speed pump, so whatever. But this first ability is great. Untap all the creatures you control at the beginning of your end step. That is good whether you're crewing vehicles or mounting, saddling mounts or whatever, which is what the card wants you to be doing. But it's also good with like mana creatures, right? You tap down all your mana creatures during your turn, untap them, EOT. That's 6. So this isn't like Wilderness Reclamation or anything like that, but it's still a perfectly like decently statted. Like 3 mana for a 3/4 is fine. It can't be cut down. It can't be nowhere to run or something like that. It can't be lightning strike. And those are kind of important benchmarks to get past, I think, in this standard. So altogether, I think this first ability in certain situations is like breakable, if not broken. So I wouldn't be surprised if people tried it in standard and it just kind of fell short. That said, I'll bring up Commander again. I think that this just first ability is really valuable in a game of Commander with all your sweet activated abilities and your mana abilities and whatever. Dredger's Insight is a card from a couple of days ago that I haven't gotten to yet, but we only got like 2 cards that day, so I just didn't do a video that day, but this is definitely noteworthy. It's 2 mana, 1 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever 1 or more artifact and or creature cards leave your graveyard, you gain 1 life. When this enchantment enters, mill 4 cards. You may put an artifact, creature, or land card from among the milled cards into your hands. I've said Insidious Roots a few times this previous season, but this is kind of an interesting enchantment for, say, green-blue Storm Chaser's talent with the Tolarian Terrors and the Eddie Merc Crabs and the Up the Beanstalks. You've seen the deck I'm talking about. It uses This Town Ain't Big Enough because that triggers Up the Beanstalk. You draw an extra card off of it. So for some people, we're looking for the best This Town Ain't Big Enough deck in Standard, the best Storm Chaser's talent deck in Standard. And I feel like, the Up the Beanstalk helps a lot of people make that decision in the green-blue one. Like, which one is the one I want to play? Now, Dredger's Insight is kind of interesting because that deck already plays Cash Grab as a 4 of. Cash Grab's an instant and all that, but at the same time, this might help increase your life total bit by bit to kind of help in the aggro matchups. Every little bit counts. But importantly, it kind of just does the same thing Cash Grab does. Like, it can't put a Storm Chaser's talent into your hand, and I think that's kind of important, right? But it can put a Tolarian Terror or an Eddie Merc Crab into your hand, and those are things you want to do, right? It puts lands into your hand. Those are things you want to do in like a 20 land deck. So, and the fact that it can be picked up with a This Town Ain't Big Enough or a, say, Fear of Isolation is probably, it's got that going for it over a card like Cash Grab. So I don't know, man. I think there might definitely be, some playability for this card because it slots directly into a semi, popular deck on day one. But let's take a look at the Commander Uncommons of the video here. We got to give it to Voyage Home and especially Transit Mage. Now, for what it's worth, I think Voyage Home might have a shot in Standard and Pioneer. This is 7 mana, 5 white, blue for a sorcery with affinity for artifacts. You draw 3 cards and you gain 3 life. This is not Thoughtcast, but in some situations, this is going to be better than Thoughtcast. You know what I mean? Not often, I would say, but in some cases, man, draw 3 and even the gain 3 life is kind of a big deal in some cases. But I don't think it's going to be too hard to figure out how to cast this for just 2 mana. It also takes advantage of the fact that, like, Get Lost is an important card in this standard. So the moment they get lost any of your guys, right, then suddenly this costs, 2 mana less to play, which means it'll still cost 5 mana at sorcery speed, which isn't like the ideal rate or anything. But all I'm saying is, if they get lost one of your guys and you've played like a Spyglass Siren that game, then suddenly the mana cost in this thing is looking like downright easy. So I don't know, man. I think this might actually be a very sick Magic card. 3 cards for 2 mana is super doable on this thing. So I like it a lot, but we're going to move on to Transit Mage. I really should have made a joke about your dad. Super doable. Anyway, Transit Mage is 3 mana, 2 and a blue for a 2/2 human wizard. When this creature enters, you may search your library for an artifact card with mana value 4 or 5, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle up. Wow. Okay, so if there's a Commander Uncommon of the day, and in some ways, if there's a Commander card of the day, I think it might go to this rocking out dude right here. It says Transit Mage, but he appears to just be like playing guitar. So I don't know if I get it, but still, he does seem pretty sick. This guy, probably not super standard, Pioneer, modern playable. I'm not too sure about it. Depends on what options we have for, 4 and 5 mana artifacts. But I'm not really seeing like too much that I want to do in standard with it, to be honest, but at least it's a body. It's a tutor on a body that goes and get the artifact that you built your deck around. In Commander, I think that is extremely important because I would imagine people are just like literally salivating, like it's just mouth watering at the ideas, in terms of like what you can tutor, what you can now effectively build your deck around in some ways in Commander. And if you have more than one 4 or 5 mana artifact, you can blink this guy or come on, dude, to go get a 4 or 5 drop. Now we're getting into, basically it reads go get an insanely powerful Magic card. And I think that's pretty exciting. But best uncommon of the day, hands down, is Diversion Unit here. This is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a 2/1 artifact creature. It's a robot with flying. You can also pay a blue and sacrifice this creature to counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 3. Well, this will take care of the Sunfall right there. I like that. Also can't be Go for the Throated, which I think is like kind of important depending on the matchup, right? If your opponent is trying to get to Deadly Cover Up and the only removal spell they really have is Go for the Throat, and that might work out for you well. But yeah, we actually just lost a card that didn't see all the play in the world, but it did see role playing, like sparing play in standard the whole time it was here. That's Malevolent Hermit, a guy that I actually miss a good bit because he was kind of a wonderful Magic card. And this dude is in some ways better than Hermit. He's not going to like come back or anything, but he starts life as a flyer. He's slightly harder, at least in this format, to kill than a Malevolent Hermit. 3 mana, it's just against the sweeper or even like the removal spell or the reanimator spell or whatever it is that would otherwise end your game. You just hold up a single mana. You get to mana leak them. That's just a delicious card that may slot directly into, you know, the current blue-black deck that's in Standard that plays, you know, Kaito, that thing, Enduring Curiosity. Worth noting that this card has flying, easier to get through with so that you can draw a card off of Enduring Curiosity. Just, they really kind of designed this card in some ways for just about any blue deck that's currently seeing play in Standard right now. So enjoy your new toy. It's pretty shiny. I like it very much. But now it's time for the rares and mythics. There are 5 of them in total today, and a couple of them were kind of whatever, you know, but there was definitely stuff to go on about today. As a matter of fact, I think there's only really one rare or mythic that I didn't care that much about today, and it was Afterburner Expert, but I like him. He seems like a really fun guy, but as far as the text box and rate that you're paying, you're going to have to convince me on this one. This is 3 mana, 2 and a green for a 4/2 Goblin Artificer with Exhaust for 2 and 2 green. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on this creature. I don't know what that was. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on this guy for 4 mana. And whenever you activate an Exhaust ability, return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So again, I just want to be excited about the Exhaust deck in Standard. The problem is a lot of the good cards with Exhaust are, first of all, in Simic. Like, all the ones that care about you have activating Exhaust abilities are mostly Simic, and that doesn't look like it's going to be like amazing. And also, a lot of the good cards with Exhaust cost like 3 mana to play in the first place, exactly 3 mana, weirdly, and then they cost more mana to Exhaust, and so it's just, it seems really mana intensive and slow, and just like you're going to get blown out on tempo because they unsummon a guy or whatever. Like, I'm not too sure about that deck in Standard, but I guess there's a reason they made this guy rare. It's because in Limited, you know, a guy that comes back from your graveyard straight to the battlefield too, and not tapped, which I think is kind of interesting, especially considering you can activate a lot of Exhaust abilities at instant speed, right? So this guy can come back, you know, during your opponent's combat step and be a 4-power blocker. And you don't care if he dies again. He was effectively a removal spell that you can probably bring back again later in the game if you have another Exhaust ability somewhere. So altogether, again, I think he's kind of a house in Limited, you know, he's got the right power, but in Standard, we would have to see some like really, really efficient Exhaust stuff for me to have like that much faith in this guy. And I just haven't seen that much to convince me yet. Up next is a card that I don't think is good or anything. I'm really excited about it. It's River Churn Monument, everybody. 2 mana, 1 on a blue for an artifact. You can pay 1 and tap it. Any number of target players each mills 2 cards. Also, you can exhaust this. For 2 and 2 blue, you can tap it, and it's a funny ability. Any number of target players each mill cards equal to the number of cards in their graveyard. Let's go, man. Like, okay, Millstone's back. It's just Millstone's in Standard. That's cute. We already had, what is it, Realmbreaker? But that thing's legendary, right? It's a little bit slower than this. So to get into play and to activate, it costs more mana. So this, you can just have like 3 copies of in play at the same time. And you're just like milling your opponent like crazy. I love it. You can also fuel your own mill if you feel like doing that because you need cards in your yard or whatever it is, right? So I like that about it as well. Millstone doesn't let you mill yourself at the same time if you feel like it. The exhaust ability is nutter butters, dude. Like, it costs a lot to exhaust this, but I imagine like this plus Jace probably puts the game away in a lot of situations. Just mill 15 with Jace plus whatever you've milled up to that point in the game, and then mill them, you know, I don't know, 25 with this. I want to do it, man. I want to build mill so badly, and it's probably going to take the form of like a very, you know, sweeper heavy sort of control deck or whatever, but whew, it's going to be fun. And I know you guys hate it. You guys hate mill. You hate it so much, but one of my like first loves in Magic was Millstone. So like Millstone plus Wrath of God plus like Island Sanctuary Howling Mine combo. Only people who lived through these horrors will know what I'm talking about and understand how annoying it was to play through. But I had the time of my life. I'm sorry for being that guy. And I guess we'll all take solace. You will all take solace in the fact that this is not a good Magic card, right? I just don't think it's going to rule Standard or anything. You don't have to worry too much about it. But I'm going to be playing it. I'm going to be out there by my lonesome playing the old Monument here. I just really like this card, and I could not be happier to have Millstone back. Look, if Millstone was good enough for The Deck by Brian Wiseman, It's good enough for 2025, which is not a true statement. But let's move on to Gas Guzzler here. Maybe the card that I'm most excited about on the day. If you know me, you probably knew that, though. This is a single black mana for a 2/1 Vampire Rogue. Good start. It enters play tapped, but it also has Start Your Engines, and at max speed, you can pay a single black mana and sacrifice another creature or vehicle to draw a card. And it does not say, do this only once each turn, which I think is really, really neat. The only thing that's truly going to help Aristocrats ascend to like a real standard deck now, because it's got all the Blood Artist effects it could ever want. It's got Raise the Pass, you know, the big like finishing maneuver, the flying elbow drop the deck needs to finish a game. It's got all the pieces are in place, and it's still not the best deck. In terms of like, you know, it's not tier 1 or 2 even in standard. So what it needs is extremely efficient. What I mean is cheap, you know, creatures, preferably that fit the theme, you know, and do multiple things that the deck needs to do. And this meets at all of those crossroads. So Aristocrats won't be lonely, man. Just a single mana. There's the efficiency tick. 2 power. There's another efficiency tick right there. It can get in chip damage in the early game, which Aristocrats really, really needs, obviously. And once you hit max speed, which in Aristocrats can be done in a unique way, right? You've got all your Blood Artist effects, forcing your opponent to lose life, and those will eventually get you the max speed. And when that happens, bing, bang, you get to draw a bunch of cards just for going off, you know, sacrifice Infestation Sage and the resulting creature. And you draw 2 off of that. You got Midnight Reaper in play. You just drew 4 cards, bud. So, yeah, I think that this is exactly the kind of piece those decks were looking for. If it elevates them, still remains a mystery. I think that deck needs multiple extreme pieces to be truly good, but it's really picking them up. I'm not going to love the idea of me having to say Gas Guzzler over and over as I try to make Aristocrats work for the next 2 years, but if I get to play this card specifically, I guess I'll be pretty happy about it. But now we are into the Mythics, everybody, and both of these look, you know, serviceable today. I think the one that has the better shot on day 1 in an existing deck is a pretty obvious call. It's the Speed Demon. This is 5 mana. They had to name a card this, didn't they? They just couldn't help themselves. 5 mana, 3 and 2 black for a 5/5 legendary demon with flying and trample. It also has Start Your Engines. At the beginning of your end step, you draw X cards and lose X life, X being your speed. First note on this card, how does anyone ever beat this in the race? I didn't read the whole story, but just like, this thing seems pretty unbeatable, just in my opinion. I don't know how you'd ever... It seems broken, right? It just in terms of racing. Maybe he's just too big, you know? You ever tried to play Bowser in Mario Kart? It's hard. But as it is, this guy could obviously slot right into demons, but I kind of don't know if he will. Like, I think people will try him out in like Golgari demons or mono black demons or whatever for the first couple of weeks on standard. You might even see like a 1 or 2 of show up in MTGO League results for these demons lists. But as it is, I'm just not sure he's going to like stick around past his initial like tryout phase. I don't think he's going to get the jersey, man. I don't think that deck wants to play too many more 5 drops. You know, it already dropped Aquazot's. Unholy Annex is effectively a 4 of 5 drop that deck's already playing. So just because of the mana cost, I think it's kind of right out. It does go with your Unholy Annex in a really nice way, right? Because sure, if you have 1 speed, you know, if that's all you have, then you're only going to lose the 1 life, which is nice already when you draw your card. But if Unholy Annex is also going off, well, you gain 2 life off your Unholy Annex. So you like, you know, that's a net 1 life gained, you know, if you have both those cards in play at the same time. But Unholy Annex should also increase your speed, right? Because it's dealing damage to your opponents, so making them lose life, so long as you have a demon out, right? So that should increase your speed for the next turn, or how you order these triggers, I think, will matter in that case too. You might be able to draw 2 the turn that you play this if you have an Unholy Annex out. So it might be worth the 1 of in the demon decks. We'll have to wait and see about that. I'm sure, though, that it'll get a tryout phase. But final card of the day and final mythic of the day is Riptide Gearhulk here. This is a total of 5 mana, 1, 2 white, 2 blue for a 2/5 construct with both double strike and prowess, a dangerous combination. When this creature attacks, for each opponent, put up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. So is this playable? Well, if we're in blue-white mid-range, or maybe Bant or something, I just can't think of a whole lot of other 5 drops that I'd rather be playing than Riptide Gearhulk. But is there a blue-white or Bant or whatever mid-range deck right now? No, that's the Big issue with a card like this, but this might be one of those where the value is so undeniably ridiculous that you're gonna make it, like, it forces its way into a house. Like, I live here now, basically, and here is standard. Really noteworthy that it may not have hexproof or anything, but there's really not a whole lot of played removal spells, especially in black, that take this thing down, right? It can't be Go for the Throat, it can't be Anoint with Affliction, it can't be Cut Down, can't be Nowhere to Run, can't be Virtue of Persistence, just a lot of black removal fails to hit this thing, which might be a really big deal. And even if they're forced to like get lost that's going to leave behind map tokens, obviously, if your deck cares about artifacts, which you very well may. That's important to add to your count. But apart from that, if they have to lay down arms that takes 5 whole planes in order to do it. It's just like relatively tough to get rid of this guy. And if they want to say, this town ain't big enough, or unsummon, or Into the Flood Maw, or some other tempo effect on this guy, then, I guess you'll take casting him again. You'll get that Into the Battlefield trigger once more. And it's pretty sick. Also, the Simulacrum Synthesizer deck, for what it's worth, this is a 5 mana artifact, so not only will it trigger your Synthesizer, but, you get to remove a creature from the board and put a relatively big guy out. 2 power doesn't seem like a whole lot, but again, double strike, and depending on what deck he's in, you could easily, play an instant or 2 or something, maybe even in like an enchantment before combat to get him up to 3 power, and then he's swinging 6. If you play a pump spell on him, he does an untold amount of damage. So, and there's anthem effects and stuff like that too that can increase his power. So depending on what you're doing with this guy, he could get in for a massive chunk of damage, in some cases out of nowhere. I think in standard right now, to be a 5-drop and see like real play and be important in standard, you have to be really, really good. And I worry that this is just really good. That's all for today. And it was a pretty good day again, People keep saying that this set doesn't look great, not only because of the themes. Nobody likes the theme except for me, but there's a lot of people in my comment section saying that like the set doesn't look powerful. And we saw commons like Collision Course today. That's a heck of a drug. Diversion Unit is one of the best uncommons in the set, and there's a lot of good uncommons in the set. We saw Gas Guzzler, which might aid multiple decks, not just aristocrats, but, a few more. It's a pretty aggressive looking little dude. And vampires, let's not forget vampires, which gets not only Gas Guzzler, but also Blood Gas was reprinted in this set. So if you want to build vampires, just, an aggressive black deck, you've got a couple of options for doing that too. But in any case, every day shows us a card that I would not mind playing whatsoever. So, I think it's a decent looking set so far, but we are getting pretty close to the end of spoiler season now. On Thursday, things kind of wrap up. We'll be doing our, rate every single card in the set speed run over on Twitch. So I'll leave a link in the description down there if you want to follow us on Twitch. So you can be ready for that when it happens. Got a couple more days of spoiler season over for, after this. And then once that's done, we're going to do the top 10 sleepers, top, X cards, probably top 25 for this set. So a lot's coming up here in the next few days. And I do think this set is worthy of, an actual top 25 list or even beyond, perhaps. There's a lot of cards I'm excited about in this thing, but that's all I've got for this one. I will join you again tomorrow. Don't worry, I will be here. I will never leave you. I am Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.